Hi, if you or your children are suffering because of your relationship with your ex-partner, because it's stressed or strained, or maybe they're just not a nice person, this show is for you. Welcome to the High Conflict Co-Parenting Podcast with Brooke Olson and Charlie Jewett. Enjoy another episode now. Neurobiological perspective of this, like what's going on inside of somebody's nervous system, not just the emotions, but what's going on physically, right?
Right. And what we're really talking about here is the voluntary versus the involuntary and how we can kind of cross those barriers, being aware of this involuntary cycle that's taking place that happens with the fight, flight, freeze sequencing, and how we can voluntarily intervene in it. So there's going to be some of these breaks in it, but we've talked about disengage, and that's the practical components of what we're talking about. What I'm trying to help people understand in this episode is to get their head around that so much of what's taking place, if we're not conscious of it, is involuntary.
Yeah.
So how we can intervene in that process and start to make inroads into changing this cycle.
Got it. Now, before we get too deep, can I go totally off topic?
Absolutely.
All right. So you said in one of the previous episodes, it was really helpful for me that 70% of the divorces kind of, sail through the system because there's nobody with any personality disorders. They're just people that don't want to be together anymore. But the 30%, this group that we're speaking to, one of them or both of them have something going on that just creates all of this conflict. And so there's kind of this, I'll use your word, in my head, there's sort of a duality that it's either going easily or it's like horrendous and you have to go to court to fix everything. But is there some percentage, is there some middle ground there? Let's say if we categorized X's on a scale of 1 to 10 as far as their need for conflict or their personality disorders or whatever, their unreasonableness, that like 4 and above, court's the only answer. But is there some percentage or group of people where the X is only a 1 to a 3 that can benefit from just straight mediation, or where like they can't deal with their X, but you can? You know what I'm saying? You can sort of mediate between the two of them?
Yes. And here's the breakdown. So when we're looking at that 70-30 split, that 30% gets split into another 70-30 split.
Gotcha.
So there's this group within that 30% that are capable, that they can make the change. They're exiting and they're angry and they've got some issues that they've got to work out, but they're capable of working it out. They're capable with some help to get their head around different perspectives and to move into things that can ultimately end up being at least somewhat normal.
Yeah, got it. And that just, I'm asking this question on the fly without ever, asking you ahead of time. Can you do mediation in other states or only here, or can you help people through Zoom and phone and provide or do they need to be here locally?
No, they don't have to be here locally. I can do mediation. I have done mediation via Skype. It's just a matter of setting the parameters down and having the rules set within that. Some of what I do is parent coordinating, and that is a quasi-mediation on some levels. And oftentimes I do those over Skype or a video conference as well.
Awesome. Okay, perfect. So back to the nervous system. Now we'll get into the meat of the show. I just wanted to make sure that I understood that correctly and that people knew that you were available for help. This fight, flight, freeze thing, which you think of, this is more like we're used to it with animals, kind of deer in the headlight, that'd be freeze, right?
Right.
Fight's going to be, I throw a rock into a beehive. They're not running for me; they're running after me, right? And
well, I would say that there's a little bit more to that fight complex, because somebody is attacking me. I have these responses. These are the automatic responses in my system. I'm going to fight. I'm going to come at you. We're going to brawl. I'm going to run like hell, or I'm going to freeze. And these three responses are inherent in our nervous system. The freeze is a response of overwhelm. It's kind of like this idea of, I'm screwed. I'm just going to stop and I'm going to play dead.
Mm-hmm.
And that is a normal component of our mammalian nervous system. So I roll over and you look at me and go, oh, he's dead. I can walk away, or I can turn my head around and I don't have to deal with this. And as soon as you turn, I come out of freeze and I go into flight or fight.
Mm-hmm.
So I find agency, but that freeze is that place of being in overwhelm.
Yeah.
and that's inherent in this whole, it's a survival mechanism, right? It's the base function in our brain.
Yeah.
It's the reptilian brain of survival.
And I first heard what I'm about to say from a guy named Ken Sandy, who runs a conciliation ministry, which is a strange word, but called Peacemaker Ministries. But he said that on the sort of the bookends of fight and flight, the most exaggerated you could get with each of these, the most exaggerated fight would be murder. The most exaggerated flight would be suicide. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, checking out, fully checking out, right?
So what do you want to say about this? Like, where does this show up in the listeners' lives, or is it only in the spouse, the ex-spouse they're dealing with, or is it in their own lives, or what are we talking about?
This is showing up on both sides. This is that first threat, that first existential threat that triggers everybody into some form of action around us, and it's involuntary. The nervous system does this stuff on its own. Remember when we were doing one of our early podcasts and we were talking about it coming in and changing this, and one of the things that you said was, when somebody fires a gun, everybody ducks unless you are trained.
Yeah, Secret Service.
To stand up. Secret Service stands up and takes that bullet, right?
Yep.
So that's an intervention in that sequencing, but it takes consciousness and training to be able to make that intervention. And this is a little bit about what we're talking about today.
You're talking about retraining the nervous system. Like I would think, and you'll have to tell me if I'm off base or whatever, I would think a text comes in from your ex and immediately you're feeling something and you want to write back and engage, right?
Right. That's the fight.
So pre-disengage, like we wouldn't even have to talk about disengage if there wasn't this neurological reality and a physical reality that something's happening chemically in your head, right? In your body, your heart, I'm sure your heart rate, the color of your skin, I'm sure that's all changing without knowing it. Like you sitting across from people, I've actually seen you notice it, right?
Mm-hmm. Right.
Like, look at your foot. Look what you're doing with your body. Look what's going on. How do you feel, right? So this is happening pre-disengage, and then we have to make decisions. And you're talking about take this as seriously as the Secret Service guys take their job. And yes, of course, there's a natural reaction, but it gets you in trouble. So let's retrain it.
So what we're talking about is exactly that. And that is a matter of being conscious in somatic awareness of what is happening for me right now. And these sequences start really easily and simply, and it's hard to go through and intervene and break the cycle. These are sight, sound, smell triggers.
Yep.
And some of these triggers are even just auto-suggestion. I can think about that conversation that I just had or am about to have with my attorney or my ex. And that sequencing starts. And I have a visceral reaction to it. My nervous system becomes on fire, and I have nothing to say about it.
Mm-hmm.
So what I want to be able to do is just learn how to go, oh, damn, I'm in it.
Right.
I'm just going to ride this thing out.
Yeah. So you're talking about a pause. And instead of reacting initially, you recognize and say, uh-oh, I'm in this thing. My nervous system just stood up and wants to roar or wants to run or I'm feeling paralyzed or whatever. And It seems like from the next point, time is kind of an issue here. Or time's kind of a tool that you can use wisely or not wisely. If you need to give yourself space to settle down, I'm assuming your advice is not to react immediately to everything your crazy ex does, but to maybe take a breather and take a time out or talk to somebody like you or whatever before you react.
Well, I'm suggesting that you don't engage in anything immediately with what is happening here, but to take time and do that. The sympathetic nervous system, again, this is an automatic piece. And if we engage in that, we get caught up in that sequencing and we don't get out of it. And that part of the brain takes over and it shuts off the cognitive process. I'm not able to process cognitively solutions if I am in the fight, flight, freeze.
Yeah.
So I need to be able to let that sympathetic nervous system change its momentum and let the parasympathetic, that calming down, that slowing down system, come in. And when the parasympathetic comes in, the cognitive process is available. And the two are mutually exclusive. One does not exist when the other is there.
Yeah.
So the idea here is that we are paying attention in real time consistently to what's going on in my body. So I'm talking to you right now. And I'm also aware that I'm a little hungry at the moment, that my heart's racing a little bit because I like this conversation. I like what's happening here. It's one of my favorites. And that there's some level of excitation to it. And I'm not in sympathetic response. I am just here and things are going kind of cool. But I'm aware of all of that. And if I can do that as a norm, whenever I'm in relationship with anybody, if I'm in relationship with my children, if I'm in relationship with my partner, if I'm in relationship with my kids, I can take and intervene in anything that happens that pulls that fight, flight, freeze in, that stimulates that. Okay. And it may take me a moment, but again, if I'm doing this in real time as much as I can, then I can make those choices quicker and not get caught in the trap of the conflict.
Right. But you know what this reminds me of? I don't know why my brain does this, but just it always goes to other things that are similar to what you're talking about, right? Sort of the way that brains use analogies to understand things. I went to a football game, my girlfriend and I went to try to watch a football game at her son's high school, and we arrived a little bit late, and nothing was happening. Like nobody was doing anything. It was very confusing. And we get there, and we were close to a couple of referees, and just said, "What's going on?" They said, "Oh, we had lightning," and by whatever it is, schools, I don't know who's got the rules, the county or the school, but anytime there's lightning, they have to automatically pause for 30 minutes, right? And that wouldn't be a terrible rule to have for people. Like anytime you get an inflammatory text or something, that like anytime your ex communicates in a way where your nervous system just rises up, there's some amount of time, whether it be 24 hours or whatever, where it's like, no, it's automatic. Like I'm not allowed to respond. That's my rule, right? And what time frame do you suggest? I mean, it'd be hard to wait like 4 days to respond to a text or whatever, but what do you feel like your body needs to get back to where that cognitive function is working properly?
Well, I think when we're starting this, we take as long as it takes. And we don't want to be responding out of reactivity. We want to be responding out of problem-solving cognitive engagement. But part of this conversation is also, where do I not engage? Where do I not respond? And having that be a part of that as well. So I can actually settle down and look at this and go, not from an avoidant standpoint, but from a really cognitively processed out, this requires no response. This requires no engagement, and being okay with that, not being anxious about, oh my God, if I don't do this, I'm going to get in trouble. But having been able to work through all of those processes. So this is where I can go and this is what I can do.
Yeah, got it. So you've got a note here, right? Retrains the brain or retraining the brain. Is that what we're talking about with Secret Service agents? And or are you going to tell us how to do that?
Right. So we are retraining the brain, because what we're doing is we're setting up a action plan. We've got an action plan that we can execute whenever this stuff comes in. So I know what I'm going to do when X happens. When my nervous system comes on and this person has triggered a response in me, I can look at that and go, okay, my first part of this action plan is to do nothing. That's an action plan. And the next action plan that I'm going to do is I'm going to assess what needs to take place, if anything. And that's action. I'm not outwardly doing it, but it's part of my retraining the brain. I don't have to move because there's nothing here that is important enough to make me move. What's triggering me is that sympathetic response. And what I am doing is analyzing that sympathetic response. Is there something that really needs to happen here? And the truth of the matter is, in most cases, there isn't.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then also part of what I'm trying to do is reframe that person. I'm trying to take that person and take that demon look off of their face and just go, they're just trying to control this because this is their need for themselves in their existential inquiry as to what they need to be on the planet. So they're just going through their stuff. So I'm going to look at this differently. So I'm looking at the whole picture from a different set of blueprints.
Changing your perspective, yeah.
Right. And as I'm doing that, I am starting to physically unplug the neural pathways that support that perspective. I'm unplugging them, and I'm coming around and I'm plugging in a new set of neural pathways that support what I want to be doing and how I want to do that.
And just so people know, when you say neural pathways, we're literally talking about physical pieces of your brain that you're growing and causing to die.
Correct.
And retraining your brain, which is called neuroplasticity, the
right.
reality that the brain can be reformed based on what we choose to give energy and put thought on, right?
Absolutely. And it is a physical change that happens within the brain. The brain can only hold so many thoughts in one grouping. And when we change that patterning, they have to let go of something, because the neural growth factor that holds those pieces together, there's only so much of it.
Yeah.
And we are literally changing the architecture of our brain in this. And that's the beautiful piece. I mean, we're not stuck unless we choose to be stuck, or unless we don't have the capacity to be unstuck.
Yeah.
And here's the important differentiation in that is when we're talking about people with personality disorders, specifically these axis 2 cluster B pieces, they don't have that capacity.
Right.
They can't get there from here because the neural pathways that would guide them to take them there are not available.
We need to, as far as changing perspective, because perspective is a huge thing, we need to view these guys more as handicapped, or like a lifeguard would view a drowning swimmer who's like trying to hurt them and fight. They're trying to save the swimmer. Right. And they're punching you in the face and trying to take you down with you, but they're just so in panic that they can't really think, right? They're just.
I think that's a good word. I mean, there is a level of internal panic or an internal dysregulation that they can't get past.
Right.
And they don't have the ability for self-reflection or self-awareness.
Yeah. And certainly not the ability, or at least they're not super skilled at empathy or putting themselves in someone else's shoes, be it the kids or you, and saying, what's it like what would it be like to be them with me acting this way? They're not doing that. They're just like, survive. Right. Yeah. Got it.
So this action plan that we're talking about requires something that's called metacognition. And metacognition really is nothing more than or less than self-awareness. It's an enlightened state of some sort that gives us the ability to watch ourselves in real time and have an experience of the ability to literally watch what is happening in real time within my own system. Mm-hmm. So again, I talked about this a little bit earlier, but it's that somatic experience. I am looking at and watching what is happening internally in real time. I can feel this discomfort, and I can actually watch my reaction to that discomfort as I try to get out of it. Mm-hmm. Because that's ultimately what we're always trying to do, is we're trying to move away from that discomfort. And if I can be aware of this, and I can actually watch my body and my physicality and my mental state trying to reorganize around that, I can stop it and go, wait a minute, I'm just uncomfortable here. And then I can orient to this moment that says, oh, there's not a threat here. I don't have to deal with this now. I can do something different, and I don't have to follow it to action/catharsis.
Right.
Now, I want to stop here for a second. I want to talk about that, because when we are trying to move away from this discomfort by acting out, by yelling, by creating this big emotional outburst, that's catharsis. That is that place where I am just dumping all of this energy. And the problem with that is it feels good. getting really angry and dressing somebody down or slamming them in that moment feels really, really good. The problem is it doesn't last. There's this reuptake that happens that the next time it comes around, I have to dump again. Otherwise, it's too much to hold. And this keeps piling on, and it takes more and more energy to dump each time. And this is a large component of conflict, this catharsis. It is addicting. What it creates within the nervous system is addictive because I want to dump this. It feels really good to dump it. All the stuff that comes along with the chemical dumping that the body is doing feels good, and I want it, and I want it. And this is the only way I can find it.
Let me ask you this question. I've shared this with you before, but it may be helpful for people to hear, and I'll be super transparent. I remember when we stopped going to counseling, my ex and I, because we'd gone to 8, 9 counselors or whatever, and I just made my decision that this is not, like, nothing's changing. I remember missing having an environment to share my concerns or to complain, basically.
Right.
Just say negative things.
Right.
I didn't have anywhere to do it anymore, right? I was completely disengaged, almost against my will, because I had decided that it wasn't working, right? But is that kind of what you're talking about as far as the addiction is like?
It's
it felt
exactly
good to say those things and to share what was hurting me because I felt like she wasn't listening, and then now I had no place to do that.
And somebody will listen to me dump. Well, it's important to have somebody that we can process this stuff with, but it's not just about dumping. If we're going to get past it, it's about understanding our role in it, their role in it, and not being in blame, because what you're talking about, that negative piece, is blaming that person for what they do, and they're just doing what they do. And our problem is its effect on us, and that is what we need to process, not to cathartic.
Right.
And that's the basis for good therapy.
And you're different. I know you pretty well. I'm sure there are therapists that'd be happy to take a paycheck to let somebody gossip and complain for years, right?
Right.
From what I've seen you do in the groups and with me, you're not out to collect a paycheck to let somebody stay stuck. If they're gossiping or just like sort of living out every time they talk to you some addiction to saying bad crap about their ex, I feel like you'd confront them and be like, we got to move on from this.
Well, yeah, not just move on from it, but really shift the orientation to the responsibility of what's really taking place here. Yeah, they're doing that, but what are you doing, and what's your orientation to staying stuck in it?
Yeah.
Because this is part of the conflict cycle, right? It's not that they're just doing that, but I keep showing up for them to do that. What would happen if I didn't show up for them to do that? I might change the mechanism, right?
Can't be a cycle if somebody breaks some step in that cycle, you know what I mean? Or stops participating, right?
Right.
Okay, awesome. What's next here?
So what we're doing this, as we're doing this, is we're taking our orientation out of anything that is past, and we're orienting to what's now, what's happening right now. This is the hack into the nervous system. So once if I'm being triggered, it's usually something that I'm orienting to that isn't right now. Somebody has said something really bad about me, or they're going to take me to court, and I'm worried about what has happened or what is going to happen. My orientation isn't to the here and now. So if I bring my orientation to the here and now, I'm looking around and I'm going, okay, what needs to happen, right? Is there action that I need to take in this moment?
Mm-hmm.
And almost all of the time, the answer to that question is no. There's nothing that I have to do right now.
Yeah.
And if I don't get caught up in catastrophic thinking, oh, they're taking me to court, I'm going to lose the kids, I'm going to have to spend $10,000 with my attorney and blah, 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 then I don't get caught into the fantasy of something that's not taking place right now. I could shelve this. It's like, this is information that's just been delivered to me. Is there something that I need to do with this information? And oftentimes, and this is the hard one, somebody has made a threat. And if I don't engage in that conversation with them, then nothing has to happen until they act on it. And many, 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 many times they never act on it.
Right.
Unless I engage with them in it. And now they've got the traction that they're looking for. They've gone fishing. They've made that hook. They've got me on the line. And now I have to do something. I have to fight it. So if I don't engage in that piece and I am willing to just sit in the discomfort of, I wonder if they're serious. I don't have to do anything until they do something. And then I have to do something. And I may have already prepared myself for that. And then I'm not reactive in it. I've already taken that trigger away. Like, if they do that, okay, this is what I'll do. But I'm not going to do anything until they do that.
Right. You're just stopping and saying, is this real? Do I really have to do anything?
Right.
Instead of reacting to everything, you're just creating kind of a filter, right?
I'm creating a filter, and I'm creating a template by which I do or I don't engage.
Is there some benefit, like bullies like picking on people that react and that like it's fun for them? But if you can become really boring to the bully, they're just like, ugh, they get tired of it and move on to somebody who'll be more flamboyant or more whiny. Is there some version of that where it doesn't look like you can control this other person, but if you change yourself, ultimately you are controlling it because it's not fun for them anymore?
Well, I think that that's very much a part of it. But there's also this place where bullies do not pick particularly on people that have potency. They don't pick on people that are present. And what you're really doing here is you are being potent and present by not doing anything.
Mm-hmm.
I'm here. You really want to do this with me?
Yeah.
So when you don't do something that they expect you to do, you have changed the program and they don't know what to do now.
Right.
So much of this back and forth in doing the conflict dance is a matter of predictability. You've done this with them for decades sometimes.
Yeah.
And when you no longer show up as that reactive person that they've learned how to manipulate, they go, wait a minute, I don't know what to do here.
Right.
And they may continue to really press hard to get you to go there. And if you don't go there, they're game changed.
Yeah.
And they have to start to step back and reassess. And that can really put them on the defensive, maybe for the first time in the process.
Yeah.
Because they don't know what's going to happen next. And it can be incredibly powerful.
A lot of people who are feeling powerless because they have this dominant, abusive ex or whatever, actually have a lot more power if they focus on the right things. So it's definitely don't try to change your ex. Definitely don't necessarily. You don't necessarily have to fight and change the parenting plan or the reality, like we talked about in the last episode. What no one can stop you from. You don't have to wait for your next court date or wait for the ex to give you permission. What everybody can do immediately, all day long, is work on themselves.
Right. And working on themselves, I think the first piece in this conversation when we're looking at high conflict is like, one is what do I do to keep this thing going? But also really what am I doing in my involuntary that keeps this going, and to start to understand and to hack into that involuntary response.
Yeah.
And that we can do. And it just takes this really strong intention of being present to what's happening for me right now.
Yeah.
And ideally, Charlie, this is, if we can do this everywhere in our lives, whether it's with our exes or a business partner or the person that's screaming at me on the freeway, it changes everything. I mean, making these changes in yourself and being able to hack into this is a lifetime game changer, not just with the conflict, but with everything that we do.
I was thinking that as you're talking, like how many different other areas of your life would get better if you worked on this for this reason, right? You got this new skill for this one application, but it would have to show up in other places. So I used to, there was probably a 22-year period where I tried to live by what I called the 4 Ps. It was, instead of just pursuing success, and when I say success, I mean anything I wanted to accomplish in relationship or financial or at work or in my body or whatever, I would say, don't just pursue it, like just start working or whatever, but plan it out. That's the first P. Prepare for it, pray about it at that time of my life, and then pursue it. So it's just a very well thought out series of not being willy-nilly. And it sounds like from what you're saying, everyone would benefit from this, but certainly if you're in a high conflict relationship, if we could add a 5th P, which would be pause, right? So whenever something happens and you feel that change in your body, pause. Like, just don't just do something, sit there, which you've said before, right?
And I'll add you a 6P.
Do it.
Presence.
Like presence, like be present, right?
Right.
So pause, be present. Then you can start, right? Planning it out, preparing for it. And then the pray can be anything. It doesn't have to be pray to one particular God. It can be sit peacefully, right? Instead of prayer or whatever, or just be quiet or another pause or whatever it is. But like, don't just pursue, don't just react right away.
Right.
Take it more seriously, right? I have to think that there's a lot of correlation to martial arts as you're talking. You know what I mean? Like, not to just freak out, but like a really good black belt is totally present and calm and waiting, not really about fear. And then only when that person takes an action and throws a punch, do the, like the minimal required movement to avoid the punch. You know what I'm saying? There's some relationship here to what's made martial arts kind of what it is, and the peace that comes to people that know how to handle themselves but choose not to unless they have to.
What comes out of being present is a 360-degree awareness. I am aware, if I'm fully present, I'm aware of everything that's going on around me, not just looking for that pinpoint place of where a threat might be. Because if I'm looking for a threat, I am always just looking for that threat in a pinpoint orientation. But if I'm present and I'm relaxed, when a threat enters the field, I know it. And I don't have to look for it. I just know it's there. And I'm able to take that on from a martial art, Aikido type of a perspective. As I feel it come into my field, I can orient to it and I can deal with it. I'm not always on high alert.
Right. Well, no surprise here, Brooke. We're in the holiday season and you chose to give presents. Har, har, har.
Nicely done.
Anything you want to say as a wrap up?
No, I think that we've really covered a lot of good material here. I think the wrap up piece is listen to this once, twice, 3 times, and start to take on this sense of where am I? What am I doing? And do I have to do anything here?
Right.
To start to learn how to orient. And one of the orienting things that this is what I'll leave you guys with, is when you start to feel an overwhelm, stop, pause, and look around you. Orient to the here and the now. Does this really need to be addressed now? Can I do it later? And the answer to can I do it later is always yes. And then to move from a place of presence.
Well, guys, there you have it. And also, if you guys want to learn quicker, Brooke's available for coaching or counseling or mediation. If you even want to get your ex involved to sort of speed up the process. I've seen so much benefit in my life in just having somebody, whatever I'm working on, in a coaching relationship where once a week, let's say, we talk and say, what are we going to accomplish next week? What was hard last week? What are we going to do different? And then talking in 7 days and saying, how did it go? And for whatever reason, that seems to be the magic formula for so many people to transform their lives, is just have someone they're talking to who knows more about what they're trying to accomplish than they do, creating a little bit of accountability and goals, and then just the responsibleness inside of you causes you to do more than you would without them. So get in touch with Brooke. There'll be some information on how to do that after the show. Other than that, we'll be back next Friday with another episode. We'll be back next Friday with another episode. Brooke Olson and Charlie Jewett, the High Conflict Co-Parenting Podcast, signing off.
Take care, everyone. I'll see you next week.
Brooke, people don't have to wait until Friday mornings to get more content. If this is something that's helpful for them, right? This isn't the first time you've broadcast anything or recorded anything or put anything out there in the world. What are the other ways people can get the help more aggressively or speed up their recovery process? What materials are available for people right now?
Well, I've written a book called The Black Hole of High Conflict, and it's available on Amazon and Kindle.
Great.
And everything that we're talking about is really compressed and put into there. So this is a really good starter place to get in and get your mind working and to see what these concepts are about and how to start to apply them. The other place that I think that is valuable is to go to our website and look at some of the blog articles that I've written. Those are available there as well. They go into some of these other arenas, and that's at www.highconflict.net. So the book, the website, are also really good places to get the material. And also, we have classes. We have high conflict diversion program classes that you can get into and get some one-on-one help with this as well.
And you know me, I'm aggressive. Whatever I want to become good at or learn, I find someone who's good at it and pay them and hire them and shorten my learning curve. What if somebody just wants your help? Somebody says, Brooke has this information. He's good at something I'm not good at yet, and I want to work with him. Do you have any type of coaching or consultations or anything like that?
Absolutely, I do. I do one-on-one coaching for custody cases. I help people get ready for family court services. If you've got that in your community, I work with attorneys and clients to help them with managing and strategically setting them up to have more successful cases as well.
And how do they reach out? You want them to just go to the website or email or phone, or what's the best way for them to reach out, raise their hand, and say, I need some help?
They can email me. My direct email is brooke@highconflict.net. That's BROOK at highconflict, HIGH, conflict.net.
Perfect. That's everything everybody would need to get some help, right?
Absolutely.
Thank you, Brooke.
Thank you, Charlie.